Значит, у нас сегодня вторая сессия, посвященная...
Let's begin the second session focused on the My Street project program. Yesterday we had a session focused on a standard on street reconstruction by the project My Street. Includes a number of unique streets, about 50 streets, and we shall speak about them today, about general problem of development. I am partner of Design Bureau Strelka. I will host and moderate this. Mr. Berikov, head of a housing facility, was mayor of Moscow, and the main hero of improvement, Darya Paramanova, general director of Strelka Architects. In this particular case, it performs the function of the chief architect of improvement. Philip Wren, head of Bureau Wren Architects. Let me thank Philip Wren on street retail under the My Street program. He performs the function of the chief street retailer in Moscow. Leonid Kondrashov is the chief archaeologist of Moscow. Gleb Vitkov is here, who is a chief researcher of the institute, representing. He represents Novaya Zemlya company, New Land, translates as New Land, and represents a sort of a dream. He performs the function of the main critic of the improvement program. Next, Mikhail Blinken. There is no need to represent him. According to the vacation, he's a chief transport expert on the Moscow transport, and Gleb Narozhnov, general director of the city of the main cyclists of Moscow, responsible for the list of bikes. So these are the main figures of the improvement. And we begin our session from the discussion of main streets that we reconstruct this year. I give the floor to Petr Palic. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Of course, it's very difficult for me now. I had a look at the colleagues sitting in this row. All of them want to say that we are doing something wrong, but that is very good, because the arguments can lead to the truth. That's why I've been arguing. But we are trying to substantiate scientifically our activities. We resort to literature. We resort to the help of the great designers and artists. We study the special literature and preparing for those great events. We studied attentively the work of the great author Alan Jacobs' Great Streets. So today we are going to speak. We can speak a lot about the improvement, uphold our position. I can demonstrate two examples. In my view, the great streets available in the city of Moscow. Starting the experience of the great streets, we say that in each city, in a great city, there are cities like Nevsky Prospect, in Leningrad, Champs-Élysées, up in Paris, Concourse, Oxford Street in London, Concourse in Paris, etc. Moscow also is rich in its streets. At the yesterday plenary session, we said that there is a typology on the Moscow streets. And among 3,500 streets, there are unique streets, including Arbat, and Tverskaya Street. These are two central streets, but very different in terms of technical specifications. Each represents an epoch, an era. Tverskaya Street represents the past, and the second represents industrial period of our state. What is the phenomenon of the Great Street? In addition to the major specification, it performs one specific function. It is an exhibition of the city as a whole. It works in such a way, if you have an hour to spend, you come to that street, you walk about the street, and of course you want to know the story, the history of the city, but within 1 hour you cannot do that, but still you find some interesting events, interesting solutions on a certain street. Tverskaya and New Arbat streets in a similar way dear to us, but are different in the functional. Tverskaya is the victory of Moscow. This is the victory of Moscow. Tverskaya is the exhibition of the historical Moscow from Yuri Dolgoruki, who is just across the mayor's office, to up till now is the Triumph streets with proud, nice buildings leading to the Red Square. New Arbat is a street of progress. It was made when we cherished the future more than when we inherited from the past. It has this period of time when Gagarin flew into the space, in outer space. Tverskaya is the exhibition of historical Moscow, while Arbat is limitless, boundless Moscow. We are living in a city which increased in terms of population by 10 times since World War II, making it different from European counterparts. Arbat represents new Moscow in the historical center. It is a sample by which major streets were built in the past. Given the difference, there are two similarities. In the Soviet time, they expressed the value of cars. Moscow was an industrial city. 1/3 of territory belonged to plants and factories. And the streets with 6 or lanes was the highest achievement of civilization. Remember the flow of cars photo, proudly moving to Moscow, to Kremlin, near after the Tverskaya. You will understand what I'm talking about. In the post-war period, they were become the exhibition of new way of life, expensive boutiques, banks, expensive slick cars, the world of luxury. That's what formed the image of the main street. There's a book by Venturi, Lessons of Las Vegas. The book is about postmodernism in architecture, but our main streets learn the lessons of Las Vegas. For rich people, it's okay, but for the ordinary people, this is repulsive. Today, we are going through a great reconstruction of city construction lately. When preparing for the Olympic Games, earlier in the reconstruction period, in the 30s and 37, at that time, Moscow was reconstructed to compare not at the rate we're working now. The main principle of the program, My Street, is comfort, ecological aspect, safety, diversity, undated, priority of the pedestrian, quality pavement, green vegetation which had not been made before, a friendly atmosphere as a public space. We employ this approach. In 2015, we improved 247 streets. This year, more than 50 streets in the central part will be improved. As to what extent we are advanced in reconstruction during the past 4 years, about 146 public spaces, pedestrian zones, and streets with a length of 209 kilometers were repaired. And to compare, 2/3 of these pedestrian spaces are beyond the central part of the city. to understand what we are doing, not only in the central part, but also beyond the boundaries of the central part, along the periphery, according to the topologically central, middle, periphery, to create comfort on the entire territory. Last year, on 5 elite highways, we performed some works and we commissioned those for further use for Muscovites. Both our main streets do not express the new street of the city. These are exhibitions of the city, demonstrating the city that was what left behind after social stratification. What we did today to change this image, Tverskaya is being to be reconstructed from Mokhovaya to Pushkinskaya Square this year, second. Not to Tverskaya Zastava. Next year is to be the first part was designed by Vested Andren Gerze, Star Architectural Bureau. They improved London, New York, Barcelona, and other cities. This design of the second part will be selected at the international tender held now. It will be completed in a week's time. 2 parts. Why? Although it's one street, but 2 sections are different, both physically and functionally. On this section, we are trying to design minimum will increase minimum twice the number of pedestrians, 4,000. At Pushkinskaya, 2,000 pedestrians. Closer to Tverskaya Zastava, much less pedestrians. Next to Охотный ряд, more tourists will be there, while from Pushkinskaya to Tverskaya Zastava, there are more office employees. The environmental functions are quite different too. From Pushkinskaya to Triumphальная, there are plentiful cultural objects. From Triumphальная to Tverskaya Zastava, there are 2 office clusters at Mayakovskoe metro station and Belorusskaya metro station too. We go back to the original image of Tverskaya. There was lime tree alley there initially. It was an important symbol for Moscow, an element of its identity. When these lime trees were cut down, it was a tragedy for many people. Now Tverskaya again will become a green street. Trees will be planted into the ground, though for the last 20 years, specialists, power engineers, heat engineers tried to convince the city management that that's impossible. Now we proved the opposite. We shall return the lamppost, historical post, as per the special design. We have standards tied to typological of the street. We have typical elements. Lampposts will be made according to the historical sketches and diagrams from cast iron and steel, and will receive its original historic image not only in Tverskaya, but in all the street, including to the program My Street.
In some ways, Tverskaya will be new. We expand space for pedestrians not by decreasing number of the lanes, but through the narrowing. Number of the traffic lanes will stay the same, so you will not have reason to criticize me. I would just remove them. It will be between Mokhovaya and Pushkinskaya площадь. Pedestrian space is special genre is the quality pavement, stone, furniture, light, greens on Tverskaya. Everything will be at the best global standards level. Tverskaya will make into city boulevard, and the alleys with trees will be key feature. It corresponds to the spirit of historical Moscow. I remind you that the boulevards was the favorite place for Muscovites. Now, near Red Square, we have small city street and pedestrian boulevard. It will help us to feel the quality of this great street. 2 words about New Arbut. To realize the project, we involved authoritative PTK1 bureau with experience with squares and parks in the largest cities of the world. New Albert is absolutely different place. Along the road, there's huge space that used to be thought through as the public space, although not in modern but in the Soviet understanding. It was good to have public events. 90s and 2000s years, it became one gigantic car park. Separately, I'd like to talk about parks. On New Albert and Tverskaya, I understand unhappiness of the shop owners and the tenants. They believe we damage their trading. But if we talk about city interests, this type of retail is luxury car parks, but luxury shop exactly is the old times when our chief streets carried only these values. And during yesterday plenary session, we specifically spoke about how to combine standards, how to combine development elements and interests of all agencies and organizations. And I remind you, 15 different agencies manage one chief street. So we put them into one goal. So it will be like in New York, London, so it will be 3 to 4 times less. It works out for now. If we talk about example of Abbott and Tverskaya, it was pretty much just like it was recalling our films about New York 30s when this colored went to the past and the frames when chief hero didn't appear without cigar. We abandoned this. We're saying that today no one makes attempt to park at Champs-Élysées on the Fifth Avenue on Oxford Street. Nothing is going to happen there. We believe that in these streets you can park, you can leave your vehicle and do something unlawful. In all cities of the world this works, and I believe it will work in our city. We'll create comfortable environment that will be used by the Muscovites and city visitors. I'm sure that we change the format of trade. Parking should be in the retail centers in the suburbs, not on the main streets of the city. Especially good, this complaints against absence of the parking of the luxury stores when the buyers travel by car with driver. If New Albert is exhibition of Soviet Moscow, Moscow of the residential quarters, what is the main value? Parks and squares. Naturally, decision if Tverskaya becomes as a boulevard, then New Albert becomes park. And to some extent, it's exactly how it will look. Rebuilding of great cities, streets, it's serious measure. Decision is impossible to make without discussion with the city residents. We tried to take into consideration the opinion of the citizens. More than 1 million people participated in voting. We tried our power in order to use central city streets. We worked, public discussion happened. Result of this work is that rebuilt streets became attraction not only for tourists, number of which multiplied, but the center of free time for the city residents. More than 90% of Muscovites appreciated our opinion. Pedestrian flows is about 1 million every day. Streets became favorite place for carrying out of large-scale city events. Based on these works, we can say that's ready to start improvement of main streets. I think Tverskaya and Novy Arbat will become example for all the city, not only the city, but also a great Russia. This is our new city. This is our solution for the sake and for the good of Muscovites. May I ask you a question? You told us about these two streets as the exhibition, but my question about entire program. We have 3,500 streets, just like it was declared It's not even 3.5, but considering added territories, it's about 4,000. Even added territories. We rebuilt initially when the program My Street started. They spoke about 100 streets per year, so it's about 35 years. Now we do it with the speed about 50 streets a year, so it will be for 70 years. What will happen in Moscow will last for about 70 years, as far as I understand. I wanted to ask, some believe that we do it too fast. What is this? Digging everywhere, and it's not quite clear. Will we have enough guts to keep city dug for 70 years? Can you specify it? How much is needed? Whether it's a lot or not a lot? And when do we come to some result? First of all, we don't need to rush. We need to leave something for the next generations, and every next generation is more creative than we. So after 5 to 10 years, something will change. But more seriously answering this question, we, for these 2 years, we conduct experiment. How much energy do we have? How much we have capacity not to stop the city, because we can enter to the 100 streets and city will stop. It will be difficult to travel, although we optimized our works. If last year we worked till November, this year we'll work till the 1st of September. And we believe that last year we made 47 streets. This year we increased capacity. We'll have 52 plus 7 in the southern district. During preparation for the hockey championship, we make 7 entry groups. In the city we work at about 60 parks, local parks, total about 4,000 facilities. This is, in our view, optimal number, and the city can continue living and working, because in this year about 85% of streets and lanes are made in the city center. When we leave the boundaries of the carcass of our city to the limits of a small railway ring, then the number can be substantially increased. Speaking about capacity, we do have capacity, but the current year and the next year we will go for this volume from 50 maximum 60 streets in order to not to stop the city. We work in the cities in winter, we prepare utilities, we move pipelines, and now we do works related to the facades, moving of the cable ducts and horizontal part of the streets, and expansion and change of geometry. I'll emphasize that in coming 2 years we will be pretty much in the same boundaries. Thank you very much. I also wanted to mention, considering the statement you made, ask Mikhail Blinken, there was reference to important topic. We destruct on the main streets, the main trading streets, retail streets, destroy parking. It's quite reasonable. Not on Oxford Street, any other street, there is no parking near the stores. On the other hand, when we made this project, I had phone calls from my businessmen, people who own some stores on this street. They were yelling, "Why you do this? You will ruin our business, because near my store there's no way to park. So nobody will buy something." I didn't know what to answer. Still, Mikhail Yakovlevich, from the transport point of view, should they be cut in these streets? So let's make retail go away? Dear colleague, our microphone is on. Dear colleague, just by incident, I was in Milan a month ago. I went to Monte Napoleone and then along Tverskaya, and near Mysnitskaya, the volume of sale and assortment of goods in Monte Napoleone goods-oriented luxury, or at least high middle class, is slightly more than in our central Moscow, even in Streleshnikov Lane. The volume of sale and assortment so on, but find one parked car on Monte Napoleone. This is the village standard, more like small settlement in deep America, when a man in Oldsmobile comes to disinstall and buys pants. An automobile is waiting. This is the village standard. I fully agree. This village standard should be driven away from Moscow, and this idiot psychology of the standard. To my restaurant, to my store, will come men and women in automobiles, and they will park here near the entrance. Moscow should get rid of it, because if we don't get rid of it, then absolutely independent of what we do in city transport policy, will feel bad. I came to the city by car. I want to have a lunch in a nice restaurant. There are two variants, kiss and ride. And second, I give the keys to a boy who will take my car to the underground parking. That car waits near Pushkin Cafe. It's village. It's ugly. No cultural tradition. We need to get rid of. Answered your question. So you came to critiques of the program, just opposite. So I was given some. I'll try to ask from Philip Wren, because he is specialist, as far as I understand, in this area, specifically in street retail. Is it correct that main streets have no parking spots? And could you confirm that this must be done to get rid of the parking spots in the retail streets?
Thanks very much for inviting me. I have to say, first of all, I came here in December last year to work with Strelka on the program My Streets, specifically for my experience at street retail. And that's partly to do with the fact that about 10 years ago, I was involved in a master plan for Oxford Street and Regent Street and Bond Street in London. And I delivered that master plan 10 years ago. And of all of the recommendations that we actually made in that master plan, around about 10% of them have actually been implemented now. So I came here in December, and I worked with the Strelka team, and the program was delivered, I think probably around about 2 or 3 weeks later. And I arrived here earlier this week, and we had a street tour. And Novi Arbat was clearly one of the main areas we went to look at. And I have to say, I am absolutely astounded at the speed at which this has been achieved. Now, I know that has caused pain, and change always causes pain. But I think you can have a choice of a long, drawn-out pain, such as Britain has just chosen to do in withdrawing from the EU, or you can have a very short, sharp shock. And I think 6 months of major inconvenience is going to deliver Novi Arbat a transformed environment, which is going to be just a huge benefit to the city. I think the next question, and Dasha and I were discussing this earlier, is how you use the space. But that's another matter. We'll come to that later. In terms of your question about cars and the necessity of cars, it is a cultural thing, and culture needs to change. In London, around about 20 years ago, people wanted to take the cars to the city centre. Congestion charging was introduced, and measures were taken to discourage cars coming into the city centre. The public transport networks have been somewhat improved, probably not as effectively as one could achieve here, but no resident in London expects to go to city centre retail in a car. Shopping centre retail, that's another matter, but city centre retail, it's not part of the city centre experience, and it's not an expectation.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. So I wasn't able to put parking lot in the central cities. We sorted out the main streets, part of the program of rebuilding. Piotr Pavlovich said that everything finishes beyond garden ring, maybe central railway ring. Let's go back to garden ring. Daria, the project, half of the garden ring is being reconstructed, just like Tverskaya. Don't forget about time. I'll try to be brief enough and fit into the time frame. Presentation of garden ring, first of all, will be in order to explain that the project solutions that we do are not just about beautiful street, not about aesthetics, about vision of the architect, who imagined somehow how good it will be. It was all based on analysis. How should I switch it? Great. In order to make this project that we did, of which I talked to you, a lot of work was done, dedicated most of the time. Analysis of existing environments, what it is made of. On the slide, I key statistics, but in essence, if you generalize and do brief, the garden ring is the transit route for automotive transport. It's in the center. The garden ring is made of 18 streets and 18 squares. When we started analysis, it became obvious that this is very desperate, divided spaces. To solve this problem was through the further analysis and clarification of every problem. First of all, it's not safe space with too high speed of automobiles. It's lack of throughput of this space because everyone knows about traffic jams there, incredibly low quality of environment. It's impossible to be there. The pedestrians can't be there because it's tight and dangerous. It's nearly impossible. Of course, public space that is not using its potential. It's low activity, absence of integral image, and decision that can call the square and the public space called public space. After analyzing all these issues, we came to 3 key points of our concept. In order to make garden ring full-scale city street, but not the freeway, we need to work on transport scheme and restore the linear connections. In order to make it, of course, we need to change priorities that is on the roads from automobile to public vehicles. But it must be done in a balanced way to satisfy both parties. For us, it was important to make improve the efficiency of transport system, to develop quality linear links throughout entire garden ring. I'll say aesthetically, at the same time functionally. Solution for us was idea to return gardens and greenery to this part of the city. Yes, we know green is beautiful, but of course green is functional solution. The green decreases overheating of such a wide and made in asphalt or stone street. Green cuts on the pollution, and also trees are security barriers for pedestrians. And the third point was underlying existing spatial paradigms. If we talk about linear part, is the length, is connection around the circle. If the gardens create the squares become attraction points that spontaneously organized now. For us, it was important to emphasize uniqueness of these spots. 3 main points: linear connections, greenery, and activization of significant territories is something that became basis for the brief we set up for ourselves, and that was an analysis result for organization of the space. I'll tell about every point in more detail. Transport solution is very acute topic. Everyone is discussing. They spoke about parking. What do we offer for the transport scheme of garden ring together with Department of Transport? Now, The change of width of street creates traffic jams that decrease. If you put asphalt from facade to facade or gun ring, it will not be efficient because in different places it's narrower and wider. So this changing lanes should not happen. We need to create equal number of lanes throughout the entire scheme. But freed spaces such as Zubovsky Square, where number of lanes is 18, not just pave, and no one knows how it is used. We create double roads to organize parking spots. This is reprogramming of existing transport scheme that must allow to do it more efficiently. And in this sense, the main topic of our plan, of course, is to shift the strategy of which colleague spoke from automobile to public vehicles. Automobile still remains part of this space, but it stops being the main.
Now, let's have a look how we imagine that. This is the widest part of Zubrovsky Boulevard. That's how we plan. That's what it looked like as a result of our improvement. You can see double roads with the parking pockets. You can see details and major elements, but wide areas will be arranged in this manner. Trees are sort of a buffer zone, creating nice environment and certainly providing safety, and transport flows are organized in such a way that enable transit traffic and effective use of adjoining territory. The most vivid element is complete change of our idea about vegetation. Fight for trees is the order of the day, but we plant a lot of greenery. That's a breakthrough. As architects, we are happy to develop that. Understand the garden ring has its name for a particular reason. After 1820, private owners had to plant trees. Later, in the 1930s, most of them were cut down in favor of space. And today and in the future, we are planning to return vegetation to make space for the people and not for some ideas. The concept of vegetation is now dominating our design concept. So historically, this space, each segment had its own tree, and we keep a linear pattern to have the same special model. Look at this solution, a narrow path. Trees had some protection curb. We're not sure that chemical agents will not be harmful to the trees. It should work nicely. This is the wide part of the double road with parking pockets in Novinsky Boulevard and other things. You can see a second row of trees. It is important. It's not the gun ring was designed by a group of architects. More than 17 teams were involved on this square and creating these unique spaces. It's a huge management work we are coping with, and there are several territories. This Krasny Vorota Square, what's look like after we plant vegetation, a wider part of the Smolensky Boulevard and some adjoining territory. Smolensky Boulevard residential building. As a summary, to sum it, I'd like to voice our priorities. On the one hand, we have a balanced space for pedestrian and for transport. We change priorities for public transport in favor of public transport. We tackle environmental problems. We hope to develop retail, and the ground floors will be developed. In the first plan, the city is for citizens and not for a group of car drivers or for transport. It's a balanced space, and that's the backbone of our concept. Thank you. Thank you. Dasha, thank you. I have a question for you. From a historian to a historian. I'm a historian of Russian architecture. You had a monography on Lushkov architecture. Quite funny. You discriminated such time sort of mutants, mushrooms, bad mushrooms, toadstools. So you're in charge of 17 architectural firms. Do you visualize such mutations like mushrooms are mutating? Are they generally speaking about their product? That text to explain how architecture is made and where it is coming from. Today, I belong to those who is changing the city space and being inside. And being an insider, it's quite wrong to assess what I'm doing. I cannot have this abstract look. But the text I wrote was focused on architecture. Now we're speaking about space between buildings, and the book I wrote, well, I had the space for myself and, well, deserted. What was happening was very interesting for me from the point of view of an architect, but was not a product of some activities. Now we're trying to act not by intuition, because many architecture was created by intuition and not by knowledge. Now try to prepare our project based on analysis and knowledge. Definitely my followers can take this part we are creating, refer it to some classification, but the radical difference is it's not just a subjective opinion. It's not just an author sees that space and describes this in this manner. It is a collective, joint work tied to reality to continue the existing space. Is not a subjective view. So the book I wrote is not just this easy. It's not that easy to insert. Dasha, yesterday we had a round table of the main opposition mass media here, the former ones, within the urban forum, and there was Afisha and Большой Город, and journalists stated as a main problem, all those who get criticized and speak before are doing it now, and deviate from judgment, avoid judgment. So that's the style of your answer now. But we have a rare person who is not avoiding judgment because he is not included into the process. The Gleb Vitkov. Indeed, I'd like to ask you, this question was voiced yesterday at the round table. It is quite strange when the epoch of culture was made. All progressive public opinion was admired that space. But you saw the projects of Tverskaya, New Arbor and Garden Ring. Well, brilliant project in my view, but the attitude to them by creative class is quite critical. Could you explain what's happening? Why such a change? Why change of heart? Thank you for your question. A very responsible critique. I don't have much time to highlight all aspects. Criticizing is not means finding benefits. I like the project, I like the idea. The city is worthy of getting good space in the street in which we can move and socialize and get pleasure. All complaints are about what to do, how it is done. In case of Gorky Park, you can also refer to the voluntary decision, an adventure of a sort, a hypothesis that somebody likes it. There was a public consensus that some green space is needed and more attention should be paid to recreation. It was a demonstration of a new vector in the city administration and its policy, and successful demonstration too, because it set a trend. And streets are the continuation of that trend. But remodeling of the Gorky Park was not related to such large-scale reconstruction. It did not affect each single person and the city. The speed of changes was different. The scale of changes and the nature of work in the street requires different thinking and should take into account more aspects, both coherent transport policy for the city, understanding the media, understanding. The 90% supported that project. That's the figure voiced here. Let me say now, it is strange to hear such a figure, even if we have a balanced survey. This figure is about 40 to 6 figures. Even large-scale changes discussed in UK concerning Brexit showed division by half approximately, thus reflecting the division of opinion, pro and contras. How do we do about those who did not support the project? That's the idea. A strange figure, even if the whole city shares the same opinion and wants to have the different quality, and I'm one of those 90% who supported the project. There is a serious doubt as to the form of decision making, whether it conforms to the real order. People voted for the quality of the environment and didn't want to postpone it, and if they want it right now. It's impossible to rebuild 3,000 streets. It will take 70 years. There is no point to improve all that so quickly. If in other cities it was done during centuries, gaining experience. We have a sort of a standard, okay, and we can research. And the question of speed remains. The speed, in 1 year we can take decision that a street will be improved, then a design is made and later implemented. A conflict situation arises, somebody's opinion was not taken into account, some ambitions prevail. Businessmen did not have time enough to adapt their plans, to modify their plans, and incur losses. Maybe within the city it is hardly noticeable, but for a single entrepreneur it may pose a problem. The people should be involved in that process to perceive the changes offered to them. Even if they are chosen correctly. An active citizen is not quite correct. Yes, we should gather opinions, but in what way it helps decision making? What is the number of people polled? Who takes decision in the long run? And the main thing is absolute lack of transparency of an active citizen to city hall. There is no buffer, there is no public confidence, so the credit of confidence granted to the city administration based on Parky Gork and working on similar project and pedestrian zones was under threat because of high risks. We assumed too much risk to implement all at a time. You said that you want to work with the main street and Great Street. This is true. but there is an indicative project was done several years back, and still it is unclear for most people why do you want to work on the street again, even if personnel understand there's a different image of the city. Luckily or happily, in such mega city, there are lots of major streets. So maybe one of the keys to solution of that contradiction is work with other main streets in the first place, and then transfer to others, because inconsistency will be obvious, and the contrast will be different. All the critical remarks are about organizing the process, adequacy of media presentation, information and discussion, and possibility of discussion for people to move. It should ride. Such concept should go side by side with another concept, the idea of a compact city. That means, so we should formulate it in a different way. A general strategy and master plan to set priorities in all neighborhoods. In this case, the effect from improvement will be tangible and understandable. Now we have an abstract desire to improve that street, and we support it, and otherwise, but we meet our desire somewhat meets with a lot of criticism. Thank you so much. So we have 70 years ahead of us. Excellent. We shall read textbooks not only by great urbanists and architects, but great governors who implemented a certain project. I have a question. You mentioned a lot of things, but we have a separate episode when Tverskaya was made. Architectural supervisory authority criticized that Chudov monastery was dug out, and there is a representative. They voiced their opposition. So my question is about archaeologically in the center. Leonid Kondrashov, do you feel disrespect? Is there any trouble? Did they break something or fail to dig something? What's happening? It is a strange thing. Maybe we should ask social psychologists rather than archaeologists. It is not Chudov, but Strasnoy monastery. It's slip of the tongue. It's a slip of the tongue. But the pavement of Tverskaya triggered the scandal. What we call safety archaeological work is the tip of the iceberg. They were prepared long ago. We argue and discuss, but when preparing permits, initial permits, well, it's too late when archaeological team comes to the spot. So we understood there should be wooden pavements. We knew that starting the reports by our predecessors when making passages, communications were higher than the pavements. It's a mature working solution that was cut before. And I have to note that these new technologies will enable us to stop digging, because communication can be changed now without resorting to digging. It is very important to preserve.
I had discussion with archaeologists as I represent city authority. I wanted to report that the job is started. Archaeologists asked me not to advertise these works. However, sometime on the 13th, you can look at the website of our Cultural Heritage Department site. We made a small article that we found the payment and there was silence. And I thought I won discussion. In about 10 days, on the 25th, when archaeologists said, that's it, we finished the works, you can show on TV. We cleaned the pavement, made it parade, style. The television came, or maybe someone saw it in the process of cleaning. In about 10 days after beginning of the works, then comes acute reaction that the pavements are broken, removed, thrown away, although it's very narrow trench. Even technically, to clean this whole thing is impossible. And with presence of telephones, and that we're very thankful to these people in the sense that inform us about progress. Still, there are some cases when it's important to come quickly. We showed them that this is quite a working situation on Tverskaya Street. At the same time, I can't help but notice that from one side, quite anecdotal moment, on the other hand, and quite characteristic that late at night, one very romantic young lady got into the trench, dug the pavement that was filled, and we were ready to put utilities. She came with the child, she cut piece of log, and she found a school, and as she thought, so she ran away, and she called to us. We came and sorted the situation out. I'd say, distinguished comrades, please don't. The labor of archaeologists is very meticulous and difficult. It's very easy to damage. Don't get inside of the utilities. And like you learned, according to our photographs, we still show everything, we tell everything, but after we conduct research. If I answered your question, the work of archaeological service is ongoing. We always discuss it, the working situations. We're very thankful for the help. Imagine archaeologist with a brush and shovel comes to Tverskaya Street. What does he do? He needs machinery, he needs assistance of the specialists, and this is what is happening. After that, our colleagues are unfairly accused that the damage with their machinery. It's impossible to start works without using machinery. It's regular practice of every work. So the works continue on, they will continue. Today we found the tea house, snack house. We specialize in catering industry. Archaeologists is close to the kitchen always. So I think the continuation of My Street program will give us new findings, and we'll definitely tell about them. And I think that in the museums of Moscow will show ad hoc exhibitions when the ad hoc works on materials is not fast, but certainly in a year or two these exhibitions will take place and we show everything. Thank you. Colleagues, we exhausted the time. However, there's one more group of critically oriented people. This is in part virtual. Is the cyclists of Moscow society. They always complain that they were deprived of something. Although, on the other hand, due to the work of Moscow Urban Forum, topic of the bicycle, and that the bicycle certainly must be in the city, it entered the scene. I saw the reportage from one small town, and the woman is in the middle of broken road, and she says that the vehicles are being destroyed. The wheels fall apart, and we don't have any bicycle path. Victory. I want to ask Leb, maybe something is wrong with bicycles? I can't say that something is wrong with bicycles. Bicycles now perhaps is the only way to move around city center, and really from year to year the bicycle is we didn't see in the project decision of the bicycle roads, bicycle path. This is generalization. I believe that Petr Pavlovich prepared everything, and Daria in reconstruction of the garden ring considered all the wishes of the bicyclists. The facts are facts. The city bicycle rent is solution that is challenged to move citizens onto more affordable vehicles rather than automobiles in the city center. The number is growing in the city center, and the number is almost equal to the previous year. It shows that popularity of this transport, especially under condition, as I said, of change that took place in the city center, is substantial. It's not only because the popularity of the bicycle movement is popular, it's because there is awareness that it's convenient, it's fast, and moving by bicycle around city center, not necessarily city center, but in residential neighborhoods, cycling is alternative way of conveyance. It shows that people are trying to make city comfortable not only for motorists, but it should be comfortable for everyone. And in my view, the changes are drastic. Once again, I'll reiterate, the users of the bike rent system grew manifold, and this year it is ahead of the number of the users last year. It's consistently growing, become more popular. It means that people recognize the city as the living space. It can be quite full of human joys by way of using. Thank you, Gleb. The work of the session is over. I was supposed to tell you that you need to consider the criticism in your work, but honestly, I don't know how you consider it, because you were not criticized. The only critique was that you should work slower and tell more rather than do. I have different principle. I don't know how you can take into consideration for the further work. I will consider all the wishes and proposals, but to decrease the rate, it's not my principle. I can't work slow. And principle to work more and speak less. A man has one tongue and 2 ears, to speak less and listen more.